The internet is made of demons. I just wanted to do a quick video and recommend an essay which I came across recently, and it's by Kriss. I honestly haven't read a lot of other essays by Kriss, so I can't speak for all of his work, but this is a pretty good essay, and it's also a review of Justin E.H. Smith's "The Internet Is Not What You Think It Is," which is, I haven't read, but by this essay seems like a pretty good book to put on the list. The reason being, and why I wanted to make a video about this quick video, is that it really kind of redefines the problems of the internet, which we're getting very, very stuck in the politics of the internet being about kind of like traditionally liberal issues over freedom of speech and censorship. So, there's censorship going on the internet. There shouldn't be censorship to be free speech, and so on and so forth. And these are basically the two sides you're given. Now, there's nothing wrong with this debate. It's worth having, but it kind of misses the point. And I pulled out a few quotes from this essay, which I thought kind of really got into the kind of philosophy of what is this technology and what's it actually doing, and what the problems with it are, regardless of whether or not it's kind of regulated, or kind of you have like a libertarian model or a super regulated model. I mean, a libertarian model would probably be better in general for the internet, because because it's a multinational entity, therefore it eludes kind of any democratic regulation of like, well, how do we put in a kind of a regulatory body in there who can determine what it cannot be put on. It's very hard to do that in a multinational setting, because there's no kind of democratic framework to do that. So that becomes extremely risky. But nonetheless, even if you could, there's also issues with the technology in and of itself, regardless of its kind of like vulgar or more superficial kind of political issues with regulation and censorship. And the title, "The Internet is Made of Demons," is interesting because it doesn't say the internet has lots of demons in it, as in there's lots of terrible people on the internet. So this is the kind of technocratic argument about disinformation and so on. The internet has terrible people on it, and therefore we have to regulate it, because these terrible people can have a terrible influence on people, on the public, and terrible things can happen. Blah blah blah. The internet is made of demons is actually very interesting, because I won't go into it in huge detail, but he goes over a connection between a sort of mysticism and mathematics, which actually goes back. See if I can find the exact quote, but here we are. Yeah, I don't think the internet of demons is only a metaphor or a rhetorical trick. Go back to those sigils, the patterns of weird, loopy, goetic lines that signify the presence of demons in online memes. Most of those designs come from the grimoires of the 16th and 17th century, and of these, probably the most significant is the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Or the Lesser Key of Solomon. Unlike the most old books of demonology, the Lesser Key is still in print, mostly because it was republished and extensively tinkered with by Aleister Crowley. Despite its influence, the Lesser Key mostly plagiarized. Entire sections ripped out from other books circulating at the time. Blah, blah, blah. So basically, here we go. The Steganographia, I think is how you pronounce that, is a blueprint for the internet. Most of the book is taken up with spells and incantations with which you can summon aerial spirits who are infinite beyond number, and teem in every corner of the world. Here, the purpose of these spirits is to deliver messages, or more properly, to deliver something that is more than a message. Say you want to convey some secret information to somebody. You compose an innocuous letter, but before writing it, you face the east and read out a spell. Like this one to summon the spirit, Permersil. And then I'm not going to bother reading that part. Immediately, a spirit will become visible. Then once again, the other person receives a letter. They speak a similar spell, and having said these things, he will soon understand your mind completely. So what you're seeing here is that kind of magic writing that works like speech, instant and immediate. Okay, so here's the point. He must be aware, Sam Kriss and the writer of the book he's reviewing by E.H. Smith, must be aware of Paul Virilio, because this is kind of like Paul Virilio's point of instantaneous communication. Instantaneous communication kind of distorts our social and you can say ontological reality to such a kind of point of absurdity. This is something we're only picking up on now. And so basically he's talking about these mathematicians who were also occultists. You can read the whole thing if you want and go into the kind of more historical detail of who these people were and so on. But there's a crossover between kind of mathematics, I suppose, like mysticism and the occult, in which there was certain deeply theological kind of mystic desires to communicate to those who are very far away without the borders and boundaries and delays of geographic space. Instantaneous communication is a kind of occult act, and at least it has occult kind of like motivations, we could say. And it also crosses over on some very Gnostic issues of kind of disembodiment and so on. But the point being that take Elon Musk's desire to wire our brains, and to one of the motivations or the reasons he was trying to do this, he said on the Joe Rogan podcast, was he's like, imagine if you could speak without speaking. Imagine if I could speak to you without having to use words. Imagine if we could telepathically communicate. So again, like this I suppose desire to like overcome the distinction between persons, like my brain is here, your brain is there, his brain is there, her brain is there. We can communicate, but there's a mediation involved. And I suppose the kind of occultic, the kind of underlying occult desire is to kind of surpass these mediations, to kind of have a full integration of minds to each other, right? We want it's almost like they want to, like it's Elon Musk's wired brain, or this kind of occult mathematician he's talking about, or the general kind of like disposition of these technologies seems to be motivated by a synchronous, and you think it's like singularity, to unify. I mean, to make something that's plural single, to unify a kind of mind, a kind of hive mind, technologically driven hive mind, in which the barriers and distinctions between our brains and our minds, of which language is the mediation, is then overcome. And there's this sort of like, you could almost see the kind of like the innovation progress behind all of our technologies, which are totally based around communication. I mean, we haven't developed technologies that really do anything, like, they don't cure diseases like diabetes or cancer, which have been incurable. They don't they can't like fix pollution or environmental damage and so on, but they are seem to be driven more and more by a desire for total instantaneous communication, and some sort of like, again, to quote Paul Virilio, the change from the 20th century to the 21st century was, in terms of propaganda, the standardization of opinion, 20th century model, to the synchronization of emotion. And I suppose this desire to get rid of the mediation of language and the distance and the gap between minds could interplay with the desire to synchronize our minds on some kind of weird level. So it's pretty crazy shit. It's pretty weird, and the internet is made of demons, and it seems to be innovated by a bunch of weirdos as well. One other interesting point he makes here. I just dragged this out of the essay because I didn't want to have to look through it. Everything you say online is subject to an instant system of rewards. Every platform comes with metrics. You can precisely quantify how well received your thoughts are by how many likes or shares or retweets they receive. For almost everyone, the game is difficult to resist. They end up trying to say the things that the machine will like. For all the panic over online censorship, and this is the kind of point I was making earlier, this stuff is far more destructive. You have no free speech, not because somebody banned your account, but because there is a vast incentive structure in place that constantly channels your speech in certain directions. And unlike overt censorship, it's not a policy that could ever be changed, but a pure function of the connectivity of the internet itself. This might be why so much writing that comes out of the internet is so unbearably dull, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so again, he makes the point that like communication isn't really the point of the internet, right? We're not really on here to communicate. If you look at something like social media, it's to simulate a social reality, which is the point. And to simulate, this is my niche, this is my identity, these are my friends, this is my bubble. Communication in the kind of like military sense of like we're communicating to tell people where which is where the internet came from. The desire for like military intelligence to communicate extremely quickly so that it could move components around the kind of like a theorized battlefield and so on. So, but the creation of a or the simulation of a social reality is in fact what the internet does, as opposed to communication. And the sort of like constant cognitive inputs, outputs, reward systems, likes, shares, retweets, we're constantly getting everything we think has this kind of like immediate. It's not even like you write a book and then years later it gets published and then people read it and then they review it and so on, and there's this kind of delayed feedback. Today it's like you post something online, you have a thought. We're all guilty of doing this. Like you have a thought, you post it online, immediate feedback loop. There's this immediate constant like, share, dislike, so on, which kind of doesn't give us the room to I would say actually really think. It kind of just emotionally manages our thoughts almost before we have them, almost. Anyway, that's just a little recommended reading. So subscribe if you're new, and I will see you next time.